I'm Mary, and I just turned 35 this year on a summer day filled with birdsong. Today, my mom, who is also my boss, called me into her office. "What do you need?" I asked. Without looking away from her desk, bothered by the heat, she told me she's giving the company to my sister and that I'm fired starting today. The bright summer sun made it hard to process. Huh. I must have sounded surprised. Annoyed, my mom looked at me and said, "Didn't you hear? You're fired. We don't want negativity here. Leave by the end of the month." With that, she went back to her documents, signaling the conversation was over. In that office with only bird sounds, I was still processing when she scolded me. "Why are you still here? Get back to work now." I mechanically stepped back, said, "Excuse me," and left, closing the door. Our company is a modest two-story building, a demolition business with around 10 employees. It's a family affair, led by my mom as the president, with my aunt and her husband as executive directors, and my mom's cousins as managing directors. Despite the family ties, it's evident that my mom holds the majority of the power. Initially, after high school, I started working at an accounting firm. However, at 25, my mom informed me that our company needed an accountant and guilt-tripped me, saying, "Are you going to abandon your family in trouble? You'll regret it in the end." Reluctantly, I joined our family business. But my role wasn't limited to accounting. Whenever there was a shortage of hands, my mom piled paperwork and various tasks on me. I even found myself doing sales. In essence, I became the company's go-to person for everything. To avoid being a burden, I dedicated long hours from morning till night and somehow managed to handle the diverse responsibilities thrown my way over the past decade. On the flip side, my sister Lucy, who was set to take over the company, is 3 years younger at 32. She had only joined the company 2 years prior, having hopped from job to job, claiming they weren't a good fit for her. Around 30, Lucy stopped job hunting and spent her days lounging at home. That's when my mother decided Lucy needed a job that suited her and appointed her as an executive director in our company. Despite my 10 years of dedication, I remained a regular employee. The contrast in treatment between us sisters surprised everyone, but I wasn't shocked. My mother had always favored Lucy since childhood, showering her with any clothes or toys she desired and praising her cuteness. On the other hand, I received hand-me-downs, and my mother often brushed me aside, saying, "This is good enough for you." As a child, I didn't comprehend why I was treated differently. I worked hard at school and helped at home, hoping to gain my mother's attention. Even when I handed in my straight-A report, she barely acknowledged it. At one point, feeling unattractive, I even contemplated plastic surgery, thinking it might bring me the affection I craved. It was my aunt who eventually explained why my mother ignored me so much when she saw me in that state. During my high school years, I was informed that my father had passed away. However, the truth was that when Lucy was born, my father left my mother for a woman from his workplace. This woman, older than my mother and supposedly less attractive, had an aura similar to mine. My aunt, who is my mother's younger sister, casually remarked, "Your mom is a proud woman." I think she couldn't stand losing her husband to someone older and supposedly less attractive than herself. There was a distinct air of satisfaction in her tone, as if she found joy in my mother's troubles. By the way, my aunt's appearance was rather ordinary, leaning more towards my side of the family. She could be a handful, but she excelled at her job, often using her charm to get ahead. She continued, "My mother took charge of the family business at 32 when my father left her. Leveraging her striking beauty, she attracted and retained numerous clients, significantly boosting the business. Part of the success was due to the era, with many buildings needing demolition after reaching their lifespan. Consequently, neither my aunt's family nor my cousins could really oppose my mother. Lately, the expenses for industrial waste disposal and transportation have risen, making it challenging to maintain a balance between demolition costs and actual expenses. Our company, along with the entire industry, was facing tough times, struggling even to cover monthly employee salaries. In the midst of these difficulties, My younger sister joined as an executive director. I wondered how we would manage her salary, but my mother straightforwardly said, "We'll reduce your salary to pay hers. We're family, it's only natural, right? Even with a salary cut, it won't be enough for an executive director's pay." I argued reasonably, but as usual, Mom insisted. "It's your responsibility to figure it out. Just make it work." I tentatively suggested, "Shouldn't Lucy start as a regular employee?" My mother gave me a stern look and rebuked. "Who do you think you're talking to? This isn't something for someone like you to interfere with." We were all living under the same roof at the time. Lucy didn't contribute financially to the household, whereas I contributed $1,500 every month. Even when Lucy joined the company, she didn't contribute anything to the house. Since I was young, I had been helping with household chores for my busy mother, while Lucy acted as if doing nothing was the norm. "Hey sis, is dinner ready yet?" Lucy would ask about dinner when I was working overtime. When I suggested she make something for herself, Lucy said, "What? I don't know what to make. The kitchen is your territory, right? I don't want to get scolded for using it without permission." "You scolded me for that before." She never attempted to cook. Using that past incident as an excuse, Lucy neglected cleaning up after herself and never put things back where they belonged. She held a grudge for the scolding and used it as an excuse to avoid doing anything. I often had to reluctantly come home to prepare dinner and then head back to the office to continue working. My mother usually didn't cook dinner either. Despite my efforts to prepare meals, my sister Lucy often opted to eat out, choosing whenever she fancied. Lately, my mother's frequent business meals with Lucy meant I had less need to cook dinner. However, the surge in entertainment expenses became a new concern. At 63, my mother began complaining more about aches, pains, and the consequences of heavy drinking. During this period, I was summoned to the CEO's office and informed, "I'm handing the company over to Lucy. You, who are not as attractive, are fired." While I could understand the decision based on my mother's past actions, it was hard to accept being let go because of my appearance. Even if my salary was redirected to Lucy, I failed to see the merit in it. When I consulted my aunt, she already knew about Lucy becoming the CEO, but my termination was news to her. After some contemplation, my aunt mentioned, "I don't quite understand, but it seems Lucy has been saying behind the scenes that she doesn't like it when she tells everyone she'll handle something, and they say it's okay because they'll ask Mary for help. Maybe that's part of the reason." No, everyone stopped asking Lucy because she does sloppy work, right? Lucy was indeed incompetent, missing deadlines, making phone mistakes, and having numerous typos. Despite some work experience, she seemed oblivious to her lack of ability, perhaps because her beauty had always led men to cover for her, preventing her from reflecting on her actions. My aunt, acknowledging the situation, commented, "Well, that's true, but I think she considers you a nuisance." She expressed regret, saying, "I never thought they would let you go. The company won't be able to function without you." Though troubled, she refrained from confronting my mother, knowing she couldn't win. I felt a deep disgust being related to such an unreliable aunt. "So I'm basically disliked by both my mother and my sister, huh?" I said in a somber tone. My aunt, unsure how to respond, suggested, "Well, your sister is terrible. But don't you think you'd be better off working somewhere else with all your skills? It's a waste to stay here." I decided to quit. In her eyes, a faintly kind light of kinship shone. Standing in the car under the red glow of the summer twilight, staring at the distant mirage, I felt a sense of release. Maybe it's okay now. I turned to my aunt and said with a broad smile, "You're right." It was the first time I had smiled so genuinely since joining the company. My aunt, a bit puzzled by my smile, returned a somewhat sorrowful smile. As I busily created handover documents and organized files, the end of the month, my resignation date, arrived swiftly. When I entered the CEO's office on time, the once audible sound of birds was absent, and my mother and sister were engrossed in lively conversation. "That sales guy definitely has a thing for you. You, That bald guy? No way. They laughed heartily, oblivious to my presence. When I cleared my throat, they finally turned around. My sister, with a curious look, said, "What's up? If it's about dinner tonight, we don't need it. I'm resigning today. Thank you for everything." "Oh, is it today? I forgot." She laughed again. Feeling refreshed, knowing I wouldn't have to see their faces anymore, I announced, "I'm also moving out of the house, so please take care of yourselves." My mother mechanically responded, "Okay, good work," with an emotionless face. Closing the door, I heard my sister's voice saying, "Now we won't have to see that annoying face anymore." In my heart, I whispered, "Just you watch," and left the company I'd been part of for so long. A week later, after completing paperwork for a specific school, I checked my phone and noticed 14 missed calls from my mother within just 2 hours. Sensing an unsettling vibe, I decided not to return the call and switched my phone to silent. After finishing my other tasks, I headed home. The missed calls from my mother continued to accumulate, and by the next morning, the count had reached 80, with the last call made after 2 a.m. I had no intention of calling her back. She had become a stranger to me, and I had no desire to hear her voice. There were even fleeting thoughts that hearing her voice might lead me to comply with her words, considering I had been under her control for 35 years. Determined to break free from her influence, I resisted answering her calls. Although I could have blocked her number, I decided to let the calls go through, thinking they might serve as evidence of her actions in case something happened. Initially, receiving nearly 100 calls daily was distressing, and I detested seeing the incoming calls. However, as I grew accustomed to it, a sense of satisfaction arose, envisioning my mother's struggle with each unanswered call. I finally came to realize the extent of mistreatment I endured. A year passed in this manner. By then, my mother's calls had ceased, leaving me in the dark about her situation. Throughout this year, I balanced part-time work with online schooling for tax professionals, successfully passing the exams. Recently, I landed a position at a top tax consultancy firm. My practical experience, coupled with the broad perspective gained from diverse tasks at my mother's company, proved invaluable in my new role. I felt gratitude for the decade of hard work I dedicated to the company, especially at this juncture. The people at my new workplace were fantastic, collaborating seamlessly. It was a stark contrast to the past, where I navigated everything alone, pushed around by my mother and sister, silently researching and working into the night. While leading a fulfilling life, I had to visit a client near my mother's company. Passing by, I noticed the conspicuously dirty windows and entrance, along with the withered indoor plants that I once cared for. On my way back, I unexpectedly encountered my mother emerging from her company. Spotting me, she exclaimed, "Ah," and rushed towards me. Anticipating criticism, I instinctively covered my face with my bag. To my surprise, my mother approached with a sweet, cajoling tone, asking, "Where have you been, Mary?" An uncomfortable shiver ran down my spine, and I instinctively recoiled. "I've called you so many times, you know." "Did you change your smartphone?" It seemed she hadn't even considered the possibility that my avoidance might stem from disdain. Given all she had done to me, I couldn't fathom her thought process. Ignoring my perplexed expression, she continued, "Oh, but it's a good thing I saw you. Look at the state of this company. It's dreadful, isn't it? You can start working from tomorrow. I'm not angry, you know." "Huh. So I forgive you for leaving a year ago. Please start coming to work from tomorrow." It took me a few seconds to grasp what my mother had just said. Did she only envision a little me crying and adoring her? Mom, I'm already working at another company, and I'm happy there." At my hesitant response, her face twisted into something monstrous, and she bellowed, "What? You're telling me you're working somewhere else while our company is in trouble?" "I don't give a damn about other companies. You're mine, understand?" Causing a scene in the middle of the street, I retorted, "Wait a minute, you're the one who fired me, remember? What about Lucy? What happened to her?" In response, my mother snorted and dismissively said, "Oh, Lucy. I thought she'd be more useful, but she was caught having affairs with 3 men from our key client. Needless to say, our dealings with them ended in a flash. If she was careful enough not to get caught, it would have been all right, so I kept her from the front office and made her do clerical work. But she couldn't even clean properly and was absolutely no good at accounting. Because of her, we couldn't even afford to hire someone else. After venting her frustrations, my mother turned to me with a grin. "That's why it's your turn, Mary. Ever since you left, the office has been in shambles. I need you to take responsibility." I had meticulously prepared a handover manual before leaving and had explained everything to Lucy. Lucy probably hadn't even glanced at the handover document, and I was certain my mother hadn't heard anything about it. Even if she did hear, she'd either not remember or pretend to have forgotten. I couldn't fathom why they would fire me and then ask me to take responsibility. This was how these women always acted, taking a tough stance, blaming others, and letting others clean up their mess. It was their usual trick. I bit my lower lip, thought of the kind faces of the people I was currently working with, and vowed to myself that this was the real world I had been living in. A chaotic world until now, but I wouldn't succumb to this pressure anymore. I couldn't fathom why they would fire me and then ask me to take responsibility. This was how these women always acted, taking a tough stance, blaming others, and letting others clean up their mess. It was their usual trick. I bit my lower lip, thought of the kind faces of the people I was currently working with, and vowed to myself that this was the real world I had been living in. A chaotic world until now, but I wouldn't succumb to this pressure anymore. You, the boss, were the one who fired me, right? My mother appeared slightly taken aback by the change in my tone. And you fired me because I'm not attractive. Isn't that the reason? A crowd had gathered around us, drawn in by our argument. Aware of the eyes on her, my mother stammered. "Did I say something like that? Are you sure you didn't misunderstand?" "No, I heard it crystal clear. You're handing over the company to my beautiful sister and dismissing me because I'm not as visually pleasing." I questioned her decision, explaining how I had dedicated a decade of hard work to the company, while my sister, who barely contributed, was handed the reins after just 2 years. The crowd began to murmur, expressing disbelief and sympathy. Can that really happen? That's terrible. Are they even related by blood? Some started recording the scene, but I was too angry to care. As my mother sweated and paled under the collective disapproval, panic set in. "Mary, you're misunderstanding. Let's go inside for now." Misunderstanding. What exactly am I misunderstanding? If you didn't say such things, you should be able to deny it clearly. When my mother fell silent, onlookers started saying, "She's silent, so it must be true." Unbelievable. Something snapped in my mother, and she started shouting, "Shut up. It's all your fault for being unattractive and gloomy. Ugly people should know their place and obediently do what beautiful people say. That's all you're good for." The surrounding people were shocked by her outrageous behavior, quickly uploading videos. "The unattractive woman obeys the beautiful woman." The video went viral, reaching my mother's clients, leading to a halt in all transactions. Over the year after my departure, they engaged in fraudulent activities, resulting in bankruptcy when the video surfaced. My mother and sister, now without income, sought refuge at my apartment. However, I refused to open the door. Eventually, they settled in a 45-year-old apartment, living in fear of creditors. My sister's attempts to coast through part-time jobs with flirtation were met with disapproval, leading her to frequently change jobs. As for my mother, the internet video had spread, causing her to be shunned by part-time colleagues. She silently worked alone. In contrast, I found a boyfriend at my new workplace. He may not be conventionally handsome, but he appreciates my dedication and sincerity. We are planning to get married soon, and I am grateful for the diligence that has shaped my days.